Hey everyone! So far into this course we've covered a lot of topics, and one great topic has been missing as of now, and that is how we can connect to the web, how to use HTTP to get or manipulate data, for example through a RESTful service. Now, we got our service set up in this project or in this course because we were already using services, but we were fetching our data from, well, in the end, just a constant or a variable we defined, right? So that probably won't be how we will be doing it in a real app, and therefore we will have a look at HTTP now in this video. Yes, that's right. We will have a look at HTTP and how we can access the web to access and manipulate data. Let's have a look at this. Here we are, ready for some HTTP. For this video, I'll use JSONtest.com, where I basically have the chance to use their REST API to send GET and POST requests and get something back, so that I can just demonstrate how we do that. I also listened to some comments which complained that it was a little bit hard to read from time to time because of my font size, so I will try to take care about that and increase my font size appropriately. What I want to do in this video is I use my contacts app and I will add a little side note because I didn't find a way to at the moment implement it in a way it would really fit into the contacts theme. So I will just implement an additional component which does that HTTP request stuff so that you have a chance to learn that, and then we might find a better way to embed it in our contacts application in the future. So first thing I'm going to do is I'll create a new contact or a new component, not in my contacts folder but in the top folder, and I will call this component http test.component.ts, and let me just get this boilerplate here, so to say. We'll have a selector of HTTP test. Don't need that as of now. No routing configuration, and here we'll have HTTP test component. So that will be my the testing component, and what this component will hold is it will get a button which says test get request. It will get a paragraph where I will be able to output whatever I have in my get data, which will be a property I'll define in a second. I will have another button which says test post request. Also a line break here, and then I have another paragraph where I will have the output of that request. The post data property will be used here. In my class here, I have to define my get data and my post data properties. So again, that will be the properties the result or the response of my requests will be bound to. And yeah, that's that for the component as of now. In my app component, right under my router outlet here, I will embed my HTTP test component I just created. And for that to work, we also have to add it as a directive in our directives area here. So the HTTP test component, save it. And now we got our component here. Nothing happening as of now, obviously, but that will change soon. Now I will define a new or create a new service, the service which will do that HTTP access, because that would be the standard, the default way you do that in Angular 2. You create a service which has the methods to get or to manipulate the data, and then you can call that service or the methods in that service from all the components where you inject the service. So that's the most modular and flexible way you could do it, and therefore the way I would strongly recommend you do it. So I create a service and I will just call it HTTP test service.ts. And now for that service, I'll use my contact service here just real quick. copy all the content here, get rid of that. I need the injectable, that's important. And get rid of that and call it HTTP test service. Good, so now that our service isn't doing that much as of now, let's change that. I will need my HTTP service to access the web. HTTP is a service already included in the Angular 2 package. So we can use that. But to be able to use that, there is one very important thing to do. But to be able to use the HTTP service, at least currently, as of beta 0, there is one very important thing to do, otherwise nothing will work there. In my index HTML, I have to add another import up here. I'll add it under the right below the router here. And the import I need is the HTTP package. And you can get it from that URL here. Be sure to write that down or look that up. You can also Google for it. And this will import it. Otherwise, we can't use HTTP. It's currently not included in any of the packages or of the scripts we're importing here. Very important. So in my test service, and I notice I forgot to zoom in a little bit more than before, but I'll do it from now on. In the test service, I'll inject that HTTP service by writing in my constructor by writing private HTTP. This import was again automatically added for me. It's importing it from Angular 2/HTTP. Now I will have two methods in this service which I want to be able to use. I'll have the getCurrentTime method because that is one of the things we can do here. Get this date and time API endpoint which we can call, where we basically have to call date.json-test.com and we will get back a JSON with the current time and date. So that will be the get route we'll be using. And I want to be able to post data. Therefore, I'm using that validate endpoint here, where I can send a JavaScript object, a JSON element, and it will give me back if it's a valid object, so to say, or what it is. Just like here an example, just a little JSON element it will give me back, which says something about the JSON I sent there. So that will be my post route. So I will just call that post JSON, just like that. And obviously now I could pass some arguments to those methods, and you probably would do that if you call it from a component where you might have some logic which defines what to post or get. But as this is just a little example and it is not about passing arguments, I'm pretty sure you know how to do that. I'll just use dummy values which I create here in my service. So let's start with the get route. As I said, I'll be calling this date and time route here, and all I have to do is somehow send a get request there and get the answer or the response. I don't have to provide any arguments. I do this by, or I will return it to my component which called by calling the get method on this HTTP service we injected. By the way, all these methods this HTTP service has are very intuitive. You got delete, get, head, patch, post. So yeah, all your HTTP verbs here. In this case, as I said, get, and we will get it from this endpoint here. So let me just copy that. And HTTP returns an observable. Observables are something Angular 2 uses instead of promises, as it did in Angular 1, to get something, in this case from an HTTP request, and then we can subscribe every component which gets our observable, basically, everything which gets this observable can subscribe to, let's say, everything which happens with this request, or to all the events fired by that observable, so to say. So as the name says, it observes changes in the state of that object. I could tell much more about observables because there is much more to tell, and observables are much more complex than just what we're using them here for. But this video is about HTTP, and therefore I will stick to the very basics. I might do a video about observables in the future. You might also, if you're very interested right now, Google that, but I will focus on just the basics here because otherwise this video would, boom, explode. So I will call the map method on this observable, and this allows me to map the response we get back to a variable, or to transform the response, so to say. In this case, I know I get back a JSON formatted text, so I will map this, or I will extract it, so to say, by using a fat arrow function here, where I pass the response in, and then I call the JSON method on that passed in value, or on this passed in object here. What this does is basically it says, okay, it has to be JSON. I will extract it as such. I will use it as such. That's very important because when we then subscribe to our observable here, we will be able to actually get and display the data, and therefore we have to know which format the data has, and that is what we're saying here. So I'm returning this observable where I already kind of specified which kind of text, or what our answer will be, our response, so that we can use it. Back to my test component. Here I want to, when I click this button, I want to fire that GET request. So I will add a click event here, and I will call onTestGet. I will create this method here now, onTestGet. This will call our HTTP service method to get this, basically just the getCurrentTime function there. To do that, I first have to add a provider, namely our HTTP test service, and I have to inject it in our constructor here by binding it to our HTTP service property, the HTTP test service. So this will inject it in that component, and now we can use it here to call our getCurrentTime method, and now remember that returns an observable. Therefore, we are now here able to use all those observable methods, and as you can see, there are a lot. The ones we will need is the subscribe method, which means to any changes that happen there, I want to be part of it and be able to listen to, in this case, the data we get sent back, or if we get an error back. So I want to receive that notification, if you want to say it that way. So I'll subscribe to it, and now I can enter three parameters or three arguments to this function. The first one is, if I get back data, what will I do with this? So the success part of our request. In this case, I want to set my getData property here. Let me increase it maybe a little bit. I want to set that getData property to that JSON we get back, but as a string. So I will call JSON stringify and then data, which we pass in there. If you're not familiar with that syntax, that's the fat arrow function. It was added as of the ES6 specification, and it's also available in TypeScript. And basically, this is just a function where we pass in that variable or that argument, and then this is our function body. We also got an error case where we say, okay, if we get an error, what should we do? Well, in this case, I will just send an alert. And the last argument is a complete function, which is execute. So we're, as you can see, passing functions in all three arguments. But in the last argument, we will pass a function which will be called when everything is completed. So not in the success case, but just when the request completed, so to say, in this case. And we will just output finished to the command line. Now let me reformat that really quick. Okay, that's everything I need here. Now, if I were to test it now, that wouldn't work, because we're injecting HTTP here, we're importing it here, but two things are currently missing. One should be more or less pretty clear. Here we're setting a provider to use our HTTP test service, which we then inject in our constructor. Now, where are we doing that here? We can't do it in our service, right? We have no decorator which allows us to set the providers array. So somehow, how does Angular 2 know how to create such an HTTP object? The answer is, it doesn't. We have to go to our bootstrap method here, and as we added our router providers to be able to use all that routing functionality, we also have to inject or provide our HTTP providers. So that's one thing. And there is one other thing which I'm pretty sure isn't clear, or which is a bit surprising. We have to add an import statement to our service because we're using that map function here. We have to use this import statement to add that map operator and to be able to use that. Now, I can't tell you if it will stay that way when Angular 2 is in its final form and released. Currently, we have to do that, otherwise we will get an error. And a pretty annoying one too, because it takes some time until you figure out what is wrong, I can tell you that. So let me save this, and now let's try it by clicking here, and we get back our time as a JSON. Great. Let's do the same thing for the post request. In my service, what I will do is I will create just an arbitrary JSON object here, just JSON element, where I will stringify, let's say, any object I want. Let's say I have var1 is test and var2 will be a number. Doesn't really matter. Now I will use this and send it as a parameter to my post request then. So I will just set it up. Now the parameter here is important. If we look back to our validate entry here, it tells us that we should send JSON equals. So will be equal to my stringified JavaScript object I got here. So that will be the parameters I'll send with that request. I'll also create a header, new headers. And to this header, I will append, that's also Angular 2 built-in object. I will append the content type, which will be application xwww form URL encoded. Oops. So that will be the header attached to my post request. And now I can again call return this, then HTTP post now. And the post request takes two mandatory arguments. The first one is the URL, which is validate.jsontest.com. That's the URL. The second one are our arguments, so to say, the body of the post request. To be precise, will it be That will be our parents. And the last argument is a JavaScript object where I can specify additional arguments. In this case, I want to pass some headers, or I will pass the header I created here. So I'll save that. Now again, I'll call the map method on this, what we get back on our response. And I will, again, unwrap it as JSON, so to say. Now back in my test component, I now will create a click event here, which fires on test post. Now let me create that method here. And I will call my HTTP service, the post JSON method. And then I will again subscribe. I will just copy that here because I'm pretty much doing the same. So I'm just subscribing here. The data will be bound to my post data property here, that's important. And the rest can stay the same. Now let me save this and click test post request. Yeah, we get back the validation that we sent an object with 2 elements and so on, and the GET request. So that is everything that is to HTTP in Angular 2, to the basics at least. Obviously, we got more HTTP verbs and can configure requests in a different way, and we haven't even talked about the methods or the functionality observables offer us. But that is basically how we use HTTP in Angular 2, how we can reach out to a REST API endpoint and get or post data, and then get that data and bind it to a property and use it in our component or in our service or in both places, whatever we want. And yeah, that's really it. To me, it's not that difficult, to be honest. I hope you are a step further on your road to getting an Angular 2 master, and stay tuned for the next videos. If you like this video, please leave a like or a comment. Please follow me on Facebook under Mindspace channel, and hope to see you soon. Bye.